Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre says Prime Minister Mark Carney should be doing more in trade talks and that any tariffs on Canadian industry represents a bad deal.
We want the good deal that Mark Carney promised. Remember, he said that his entire election campaign was about elbows up, don't accept a bad deal. Well, one-sided tariffs on Canadian industry would be a bad deal. I told all my members of Parliament to use every single contact they had to fight for Canada and Canadian jobs. And I reiterate that to any of our MPs or any Canadian. If you have contacts south of the border, use those to put pressure to fight for tariff-free trade.
For more on the Conservatives' approach, I'm joined by Alberta MP and Conservative critic for Canada-U.S. relations, Shuvaloy Majumdar. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So you heard there, and you well know your party's position. Your party wants to see a deal with no tariffs at all. I'm sure everyone would like to see that too, but is that really realistic, seeing as President Trump has seen tariffs as a way for his government to raise money?
You know, it's interesting you asked that question. I would also point out former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland's interview on Bloomberg today, where she described a structural weakness of tariffs that are one-sided. Unilateral, one-sided tariffs that are focused on deindustrializing our economy is an existential risk to the country. And the Prime Minister had promised a better deal, a deal that would be good for the Canadian all aluminum workers, lumber workers, steel workers, and other manufacturing, auto workers. The permanent disadvantage of permanent tariffs is an obvious concern that premiers would have, that the opposition has, and I'm sure Mr. Carney's own caucus has when it comes to the direction that he's taking these negotiations. Of course, we haven't seen the deal yet. I think it's probably important for us to take a measure of what is ultimately announced, if it is announced, and then have a chance to respond accordingly.
Since you brought up Chrystia Freeland, she also, though, said in that interview that while no one's happy to see some kind of permanent tariff there, she did say that will also be a bad deal for both countries.
Yep.
And she also said, though, that a deal at least would provide some certainty for businesses, even if it kind of sticks in our craw that we're having to accept tariffs. So is that not sort of a bigger picture of just saying this is not great to having tariffs? I mean, I think everyone agrees it's not great to have tariffs, but it's what we have to accept, it seems.
And that's exactly the fair point to make, because here we are a year and a half into the Prime Minister's tenure, where we've had plenty of opportunity to build up the Canadian strength on our industrial base, on AutoPac 2.0 proposals, on delivering a strategic minerals and energy reserve as a positive incentive in negotiations. We've had over a year to build up our strength to negotiate with Washington and with the world, and we've seen that squandered. And even in these negotiations that we're in right now, the unilateral and unjustified tariffs that President Trump has imposed on Canada is intolerable to all of us. We don't like Canada being used as a punching bag. But let's not forget that we are entering these negotiations on American terms, not terms defined by Canada. These are not the terms that we should be negotiating from a position of weakness. And it's a sad story for the sectors that are involved in the provinces and communities that are dealing with very anxious and existential questions.
Well, how would we come at it from a more position of strength? I mean, your party has suggested that Canada and negotiators have not used the leverage to its full potential, but you're not at the negotiating table. None of us are.
None of us.
So how do we know that they haven't used all the leverage that your party has recommended using?
It's a great question. I'm grateful for it. From the very beginning, we have said that we would unlock our resources, we would unlock our industrial base, that we make the big decisions, the catalytic ones that the Prime Minister also campaigned on in the last election. We said that we would build up the strength of this country to be able to negotiate with strength with the United States and with the world. What we have seen instead is a year and a half of concession after concession after concession of getting nothing. And we don't even know that the deal that's being considered today, I can't find a single analyst who says that we're in a better position than the deal that was offered in October, which begs the question, what has the government been doing for the last year beyond their side adventures in Beijing and trying to organize middle powers in Europe? Have they actually engaged the United States with the strength and confidence that Canadians should have? Have they looked at all of the issues that Canada needed to structurally reform for ourselves out of a matter of self-respect, made those big decisions with the support of an animated opposition and a consensus moment for our country? Had they actually delivered the kind of negotiations and the backbone that Canadians expected them to deliver? And that's not what we've seen. We've not seen the deal that the Prime Minister promised. We've not seen the negotiation that the Prime Minister has promised. And tragically, we're now watching a country that in the 11th hour is being forced to negotiate on terms that were not defined by Canada.
Now, I don't speak for the government, so I'm sure they would say that they have done those things, that the Major Projects Office and all the announcements and the foreign investment that's come in, all of that, I think they would just push back a little to say...
I'll respond to that, because I'd say that at the end of the day, you have 500 projects in front of the Major Projects Office and not a single solitary decision to unleash any of it. For the investments that have been announced, they're all notional memorandums of understanding, which is nice in theory, but I haven't seen the kind of investment, the hundreds of billions of dollars of investment that the country needs to unlock its resources. And that's principally because the government hasn't made the decisions to go after anti-development legislation for our energy commodities. They haven't made the decisions to support AutoPac 2.0 that would increase production between Canada and America for both, to the benefit of both of our countries. They haven't made these decisions at all. So
in terms of the leverage, though, that your party has said is not being used, you talked about energy, mineral reserve, as long-term leverage defense. We are seeing some of it now come out in leaks that is stuff that's on the table in terms of energy, especially. So can you still say that Canada hasn't used everything that it has in its toolbox when we're now hearing that those are on the table?
The Prime Minister announced, rightly so, that we should have increased spending on defense many, many months ago. The Prime Minister's walked back on the digital services tax. He was caught with his hand in the cookie jar when he walked back counter-tariff measures and wasn't upfront and open about what he's getting for Canada for these concessions. All we have seen are concession after concession after concession, and now the Prime Minister's negotiating as a one-man band because he hasn't been consulting with Parliament, he hasn't been consulting with the opposition, he hasn't been bringing the premiers aboard. I'm not sure that we're seeing the kind of technical briefings that the press received in previous negotiations. So it's a one-man show, and we haven't seen the kind of negotiation that Canadians expect, not at all.
I do want to point out that in the clip we played of your leader saying that he still fully supports any member of his party using whatever contacts they have to push for Canadian interests, especially south of the border. That, of course, was in response to a question about the story that's come out that Vice President Vance described in audio that has been leaked Poilievre as a non-entity in trade talks, but yet touted his friend MP Jamil Javani as being a helpful advocate for Canada's position. I'm wondering if Javani's efforts to help are actually undermining your leader and your party?
And that's a fascinating question, but there's two things I'd take away from this. Mr. Javani is championing the interests of his constituents, as all of us are in whatever way we can. Many members of Parliament have been across the border looking for friends and allies to try and support the government. We haven't seen the kind of collaboration from the government when it comes to using Parliament at large, with the briefings that have been held with my friend and colleague MP Randy Hoback had been describing how he'd be part of multi-party delegations and be successful at Team Canada. We haven't seen Team Canada at all. And I'd also say, to the point that has been raised, you know, Mr. Poilievre, my Conservative leader, has been to the United States. He's been respectful to Prime Minister Carney's negotiation as a negotiator for the role. He has been insistent that there's one government that speaks with one voice with the negotiation, not undermining the negotiation. I think that's a mature and responsible position to be taking in a time that the Prime Minister has described as the greatest crisis since the Second World War. And so for all of our colleagues who are working so hard on behalf of all of our constituents, and particularly the auto sector, the lumber sector, the steel sector, we want to make sure that the lumber sector, that we're putting the best negotiation we can forward for the country.
But it can't be nice to hear your leader being called a non-entity by the Vice President of the United States.
I think it's a statement of maturity in that we have not inserted ourselves in a parallel negotiation with the United States in a way that would undermine the country. We're patriots. We love this country. We want our negotiators to be successful. We want the Prime Minister to be successful in negotiating a good deal for the country.
Are you saying that Jamil Javani has inserted himself, or the way he's going about it is still useful?
Listen, I was with Mr. Javani in Washington earlier this year alongside MPs Mantle and Chong. We had a great session with the USTR in his engagement with the energy industry. It was informative for us as parliamentarians to understand the trade negotiation and where the thinking might have been at that point, including some understanding of what had been described before. I think those are constructive things to have been done, and they're totally normal activities for parliamentarians to undertake, and Mr. Javani was fighting for his constituents.
I appreciate your time. I have to leave it there.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. That is Conservative critic for Canada-U.S. relations, Shuvaloy Majumdar.